Do not touch that gate, boy.
It is my gate, ma'am.
Say it slower. It is my gate.
Babe, he is doing the voice.
$14.18 Wren Hollow. I pay the taxes on it.
You mow it. There is a difference.
Officer, my license is in my sleeve pocket. I am reaching with 2 fingers.
Harvey. Nettles. You people print these at the mall now.
Do not do that.
Oops. Now he has no ID. Now you have to take him in.
Handle it.
Careful. He is a big one. $6:41, Tuesday, December 10th. Officer, your camera is running.
Have you ever stood at your own gate and had to prove you live there in 22 days? That woman in the pink blazer watches this same man raise his right hand in a county courtroom. By then, she has already said the one sentence that ends her. Comment where you are watching from. Drop a like. And let us rewind. Harvey Nettles had spent 19 years in courtrooms before he ever spent a night in a cell. He started as a public defender in Bickham County. It was the only job that would take a kid with a state school degree and no connections. He stayed 11 years. Then he crossed the aisle and became a prosecutor. He was good at it in a way that made people uncomfortable. Because he kept declining cases other prosecutors would have filed. He had a rule he said out loud at every training he ever gave. If the only evidence is that somebody called, you do not have evidence. You have a phone call. In November, he ran for district attorney of Bickham County and won by 4,000 votes. He did not put a sign in his own yard. He did not put one on his car. Antoinette asked him, why? He said, yard signs go in neighborhoods where people already agree with you. And that is not where elections are won. So the neighbors on Wren Hollow Lane knew exactly 3 things. A man had moved in. He had a wife and a gray truck. He ran before sunrise. That was the whole file. Antoinette Nettles was 39, black, an architect, and beautiful in a way that made contractors take their hats off without deciding to. She designed county libraries and rural clinics, buildings meant to be used by people who did not usually get anything designed for them. She had picked the house on Wren Hollow the way she picked everything. Slowly, twice, and then all at once. They closed on 1418 Wren Hollow Lane. In March, 4 bedrooms, a brick front, a black mailbox that matched every other black mailbox on the street. Kristen Ellingson lived at 1420. She sold luxury property in 3 counties. And she had built an entire brand on the color of her blazers. Neon pink on the signs. Neon pink on the bus bench downtown. Neon pink on the folded card she left in mailboxes twice a year. asking if you had thought about what your home was really worth. She was also the safety chair of the Marybrook Farms Homeowners Association. It was a position she had invented for herself. She ran the neighborhood watch page too, 240 members, and she posted on it most nights. Her fiancé was Carson Stanhope. He sold commercial insurance and lifted at the same gym every morning at 5. He called her Babe, in a voice that carried across a cul-de-sac. The ring on her hand was a round white stone in a plain setting. She had a habit of turning it with her thumb when she was deciding something. The first call came on day 4. Harvey was carrying a box of legal binders from the truck to the garage at 9 at night. A cruiser rolled in behind him with the spotlight already up. The officer was polite, embarrassed, and gone in 6 minutes. Harvey went back for the next box. He did not mention it to Antoinette until the following weekend. When he did, he said it the way you mention weather. The second call came 11 days later. While Antoinette was measuring the side yard with a laser and a clipboard, the third came when Harvey's mother visited. Dovie Nettles was 71. She had raised 3 children in a duplex with 1 working window unit. She had never once in her life been described as suspicious. Then she walked from her car to her son's front door, carrying a foil pan of macaroni. The caller reported an unfamiliar older woman going door to door. Dovie stood on the porch with the pan going cold in her hands while an officer wrote down her name and her date of birth. That night, Harvey opened a spiral notebook and wrote a date, a time, and 1 line. He did that every time after. He did not call anybody. He did not tell the responding officers what he did for a living. He never once said the word election. 3 houses down lived Barnaby Kilbane, 74. A retired county surveyor. He had a trail camera zip-tied to a fence post because raccoons kept getting into the culvert. It pointed at the storm drain on the corner of Wren Hollow and Marybrook Court. It had been running, unwatched, for 2 years. Dolores Trask, the association president, kept every neighborhood email in a folder. She had been sued over a fence once and had learned at the New Braddock Police Department, a rookie named Judson Brill finished field training in September. He was assigned to the West Beat. It included Marybrook Farms. Nobody in any of those houses knew they were building a case. Call 5 came on a Saturday in May. The Nettles house had 11 adults in the backyard, a rented smoker, and a playlist that never went above conversation level. Antoinette had checked. She had actually walked to the sidewalk with her phone and measured the sound, because she was an architect, and that is how architects worry. The complaint said a large gathering with possible unpermitted vending. 2 officers walked around the side of the house at 4 in the afternoon and asked to see a permit for a family cookout. Harvey handed them a paper plate of brisket instead. They laughed. They left. The 11 adults in that yard did not laugh. And 4 of them never came back to the house again. Call 9 was the one that cost money. Antoinette had a client at the dining table, a county facilities director reviewing drawings for a rural clinic. A cruiser came up the driveway with the light bar going and parked behind the client's car. The complaint said an unknown vehicle had been sitting at the residence for over an hour. The officer was apologetic. It took 9 minutes. The client took his drawings, said he would call, and did not call for 5 weeks. Antoinette stopped taking meetings at the house after that. She rented an office downtown she did not need. $400 a month. She never told Harvey why she rented it. He knew. Call 11 was the gray truck. Call 14 was a Tuesday in July, and it happened at 6 in the morning while Harvey was running. He was 3/4 of a mile from his own front door. A cruiser pulled alongside him at a walking pace for half a block before it stopped him. Somebody had reported a man running away from the direction of the houses. The officer asked where he lived. Harvey told him. The officer asked if he could prove it. Harvey said his license was at home. In the kitchen. In a bowl. Because he was running. They stood on the shoulder of Marybrook Court for 11 minutes while a records check ran. Harvey started carrying his license in a sleeve pocket after that. Every single run. A grown man with a driver's license zipped into his shirt so he could jog past his own mailbox. Call 19 was the one that got recorded. They were all recorded. Every 911 line in Bickham County records automatically and holds the audio, but call 19 is the one a state investigator would later read into a transcript. Twice. Slowly, so the room could hear it the second time. It came in on a Thursday night in September. Antoinette was carrying groceries from the garage into the kitchen. The call ran 41 seconds. The caller gave the address first. Then she said this: "How many of these do I have to make before somebody actually does something about these people?" The dispatcher asked what the emergency was. The caller said she was uncomfortable. The dispatcher asked what she had observed. There is a pause on that recording that runs 4 full seconds. Then the caller said, "Bags. She is carrying bags into the house." A unit was dispatched. Antoinette stood in her own garage holding a carton of eggs while an officer explained that they were required to respond to everything. Call 22 was about the mail. Harvey had walked to the box in a hooded sweatshirt because it was 38 degrees outside. Call 24 came on a Sunday at 11 at night. Antoinette had gone out to move the sprinkler timer. The complaint said a flashlight was moving in the side yard. 2 units came. Both officers were young. One of them apologized 4 separate times and could not stop. And somehow that was worse than if he had not. Harvey wrote it down. Date, time, badge number. Then he sat in the dark kitchen for a long while and did not turn a light on. Turning a light on at 1418 had apparently become a thing that happened to people. Here is the part that mattered later. And nobody saw it at the time. None of those calls generated a report. At the New Braddock Police Department, every response ends with a disposition code. The responding officer types it. A supervisor approves it. There is a code for unfounded. There is a code for gone on arrival. And there is a code called assist. No action taken. Which was written for helping a stranded driver or checking on an unlocked door. Sergeant Heath Tackett approved every single one of them as assist. No action taken. He was 49. White. 16 years on. And he was not a villain in his own head. He was a supervisor with a shift to staff and a spreadsheet that counted how many reports his officers wrote. Reports meant paperwork. Paperwork meant hours. Assist. No action taken. Took 4 seconds to approve. Unfounded made somebody sit down and write a narrative. So in the county record system, on paper, at Harvey Nettles' address, nothing had ever happened. Not once. Not in 9 months. The letters started in August. The Marybrook Farms Homeowners Association sent a violation notice about a commercial vehicle in the driveway. The truck was a gray pickup with no lettering on it at all. Harvey wrote a polite response and attached a photograph. The association sent a second notice about a non-conforming garden bed along the side yard. Antoinette had drawn that bed to scale and submitted it in April. The Architectural Committee had approved it in April. In writing. The Architectural Committee had one active member. Her office was her kitchen at 1420. By September, the Neighborhood Watch page had a name for the house. Nobody used the word. They used the address. Anybody home at 1418. Cruiser at 1418 again. Just asking. Is 1418 a rental? It was not a rental. There was a deed with 2 names on it at the county clerk's office. That office is 4 minutes from the police station. In 9 months, not one person walked in and looked at it. In October, a listing agent walked a young couple through the empty house across the street. On the porch, on the way out, she lowered her voice and said the street had seen some activity lately. The couple bought in a different subdivision. Barnaby Kilbane noticed too. He had lived on Wren Hollow for 22 years. He told Dolores Trask at the mailbox what he had counted. More police cars on that street in 1 year than in the previous 9 put together. He said somebody ought to look into it. Dolores said she would bring it up at the meeting. She did not. Dovie Nettles stopped visiting in October. She did not announce it. She just started asking her son to come to her instead. When he asked why, she said the drive was long. It was a lie. They both let it be one. Officer Judson Brill responded to 4 of the calls himself. The 4th time, he sat in his cruiser at the end of Wren Hollow Lane for 6 minutes before he drove away. He was 25. He had a probationary year behind him and a mortgage in front of him. He typed, "Assist." No action taken. Because that was what the sergeant approved. Then he told himself the same thing he had told himself the other 3 times. It is not my call to make. Harvey kept the notebook. Date. Time. Officer name if he got it. What was said? Nothing else. No adjectives. No feelings. 19 years of building cases had taught him that the file that wins is the boring one. There was one more thing he never wrote in the notebook, because it did not belong in a case file. He had won that election on a platform with 4 words in it that nobody in Marybrook Farms had bothered to read. Prosecute false reports too. He never mentioned the election. Not to a single responding officer. Not to a neighbor. Not to the association. Antoinette asked him once. In November, 3 days after he won, why he did not simply say it. He said, "Because the day I say it, this stops being what it is. It becomes a story about a man they should have been nicer to. That is not the story. The story is what happens to everybody on this street who cannot say it." She said, "And how long do you plan to let it be that story?" He said, "Until it is finished." On the evening of December 9th, Kristen Ellingson stood at the kitchen island at 1420. She poured a glass of white wine and pulled up the county tax portal on her laptop. Carson was on the couch with a game on. She scrolled. She said the market in Marybrook was soft, and she knew exactly why. Carson said, "Babe, you say that every year." She said one more. She turned the ring on her finger with her thumb. Once. The way she did when she was deciding something. Then she said it out loud. To the room. In the tone of a woman confirming a dinner reservation. One more, and it stops being a complaint and starts being a pattern. And a pattern gets people moved. Then she set an alarm on her phone for 6:30 in the morning. He ran at 6:30. She wanted to be outside when he came back. The new Braddock City Jail books an adult in about 40 minutes when the adult has a driver's license. Harvey Nettles did not have a driver's license. It was in a storm drain 9 miles away. Under 2 inches of black water. Face up. So they booked him as an unidentified adult male. That is a different process. That process involves a LiveScan machine, which was down that morning. Then a second machine at the county annex. Then a wait for a records clerk who came in at 9. He gave them his name 11 times. He spelled it. He gave them his date of birth, his address, and the name of the bank that held the mortgage on his house. They wrote it all down. Then they left the booking status as pending identification. Because policy said a verbal claim is not identification. He was in a holding cell for 16 hours. The charges on the paper were disorderly conduct, failure to identify, and resisting arrest without violence. He had not raised his voice. He had not pulled his hands away. There is a phrase in the report that reads, "Subject was uncooperative and had to be physically secured." Officer Judson Brill typed that phrase because Sergeant Heath Tackett told him to. Tackett said it was the standard language for a hands-on custody. Brill had never written one before. 10 months of calls at that address had produced 0 reports. The one morning the resident got handcuffed produced a report in 35 minutes. Antoinette Nettles started calling at 6:50 in the morning. She called the non-emergency line. They had nothing at that address. She called the jail. The jail had no Nettles. She drove to the police station and stood at a window of scratched glass. She was told, kindly, that there was no one by that name in custody. Because there was not. There was an unidentified adult male in cell 4. She said his name to 4 different people in 3 different buildings. Every one of them typed it into a system that had never heard of him. She found him at 1 in the afternoon by driving to the county annex and describing what he had been wearing. Meanwhile, the video went up at 8:04 in the morning. Kristen Ellingson posted 41 seconds of vertical footage to the Marybrook Farms Neighborhood Watch page. 240 members. The caption said, "This is why we stay vigilant. Ladies." By 10, it was on a county page with 9,000 members. By that evening, a regional account had lifted it, cropped it, and captioned it again. It passed 200,000 views. Not one person in the comments asked who the man was. You could see the handcuffs. You could not see the storm drain. She had started recording after that part. Antoinette watched it in the annex parking lot with the engine running. Her hands shook so badly she had to set the phone down on her knee. When Harvey came out at 10 that night, he had a paper bag with his house key in it and a court date in January. She had a whole speech ready. She got about 4 words into it. He said, "Was the body camera on?" She said, "What?" He said, "That is the only question. Was it on?" He did not call a lawyer that night. He did not call the newspaper. He did not call the 3 television stations that had already picked up the clip. Herbert Nunnally, the outgoing district attorney, called him at 11. He had seen the video. He had recognized the man who was replacing him in 22 days. He was so angry he could barely finish a sentence. Harvey told him to do nothing. Nunnally said he could have the charges dropped by Thursday. He said he could have Tackett on a desk by Friday. He said 1 phone call? Harvey said no. He said, "If you drop it Thursday. It is a favor. Favors do not leave paper. Charges do. Let it sit. Let them keep filing. Every day this stays open. Somebody on their side writes one more thing down and signs it." Then he said the thing Antoinette would repeat under oath 8 months later. "Do not interrupt a confession." 6 miles away. Judson Brill sat in his truck outside his apartment, in his uniform, with the engine off. At the end of his shift, Tackett had told him not to worry about the extra paperwork on the recording. Body camera footage at New Braddock is retained 90 days, and then it purges automatically, unless somebody manually flags it as evidentiary. Tackett said the case was a misdemeanor, and it would plead out long before 90 days. He said, "Let it roll off." At 2 in the morning, Brill logged in from home and flagged the file. He did not tell anyone. He did not tell his sergeant. He did not tell his union rep. And he did not tell his girlfriend. He just checked 1 box in a record system and went to bed and lay there with his eyes open. That single checkbox is the reason the rest of this story exists. January 1st fell on a Wednesday. Bickham County swears in its elected officers at 10 in the morning. It happens in the main courtroom on the second floor of the courthouse in New Braddock. It is a small ceremony. Folding chairs down the center aisle. A table of grocery store cookies in the hallway. A county employee with a tripod who streams the whole thing to the county website. Because the open meetings law says somebody has to. That morning, at 1420 Wren Hollow Lane, Kristen Ellingson was at the kitchen island in a robe with a coffee. She had an open house at 1. The neon pink blazer was hanging on the doorframe behind her. Steamed. Ready? Carson was making eggs. The county live stream was up on her laptop because the association had a rezoning item coming, and she'd like to know who was sitting where. The clerk called the courtroom to order. The outgoing district attorney, Herbert Nunnally, spoke for 2 minutes about 31 years of service. Then he said he had one last thing to do. He said it was the best part of the job. He asked the incoming district attorney to come forward. Harvey Nettles stood up in the second row. 6'3" in a charcoal suit. His wife on his left, holding a family Bible with a cracked spine. His mother on his right in her church coat, with her hand already over her mouth. He walked to the front. He turned to face the room. He raised his right hand. In a kitchen 9 miles away, a woman in a robe set her coffee down without looking. She missed the edge of the counter. The mug hit the tile and did not break. It rolled. Nobody picked it up for 11 minutes. Carson said, "Babe? Babe, is that?" She did not answer him. She had gone very still. People go still like that when the floor they have stood on for 10 months turns out to be a photograph of a floor. On the screen, the judge read the oath. Harvey Nettles repeated it. Support and defend. Faithfully discharge. So help me God. The room applauded. Somebody in the back whistled. His mother cried the way women of her generation cry. Silently, with her chin up. Then the new district attorney of Bickham County stepped to the microphone. He did the one thing nobody in that courtroom expected, including his own wife. He said, "My first official act is a recusal." The room got quiet in the way rooms do when the sound of chairs stops all at once. He said, 3 weeks ago, I was arrested on my own driveway. Most of you have seen the video. I want to be extremely clear about something. There are 22 lawyers in this office. Every one of them is watching how I handle this. I will not touch it. He said, "This morning I signed a referral. Every matter arising from that address goes to the Special Prosecutions Division of the State Attorney General. My own arrest. The officers involved. The caller. Not my office. Not my staff. Not my investigators. I will not read the file. I will not be briefed on the file. If anyone from this office contacts that division about this matter, I will fire them the same day." Then he said, "I did not run for this job to use it. I ran for it because somebody used it on me for 10 months and nobody wrote it down." He stepped back from the microphone. Antoinette Nettles found out her husband was giving the case away at the same moment the rest of the county did. She was standing 3 feet from him with the Bible still in her hands. She looked at the side of his face and said nothing until they were in the car. Then she said one word. Twice. "Why? Why?" he said. "Because when this lands, I want the only fingerprints on it to belong to somebody who does not love me." A woman in her 50s, in a navy suit, stood up in the third row. The county employee panned the tripod to her. She was clearly supposed to be there. Corliss Sturgill, Chief of Special Prosecutions for the State Attorney General, had driven 2 hours that morning. She said 11 words into the microphone and sat back down. "We accepted the referral at 6:30 this morning. It is open." In the kitchen at 1420, Carson turned the laptop toward himself and read the banner along the bottom of the stream twice. He said, "Okay, okay, but he just said he is not doing anything. That is good. Right, babe? He literally just said he will not touch it." Kristen Ellingson said nothing. She was 34 years old and she sold houses for a living. That meant a whole adult life spent reading rooms and reading paper. She had understood the entire thing about 9 seconds before her fiancé did. She said, "No." She said, "If he was going to bury it, he would have kept it." Carson said, "What?" She said, "He gave it away so nobody could ever say he cooked it." Then she picked her phone up off the counter, and the neighborhood page had already turned. 240 members had watched the same live stream. The video of the handcuffs was still pinned at the top of the page from December. 41 seconds of it. Posted by her. Captioned by her. With her name on it. Underneath it. That morning, people were typing, "Wait, is that the same guy? Kristen, what did you do? I told my husband something was off about this." By noon, a member had screenshotted the pinned post and sent it to a reporter. By 2, she had taken the page private. By 4, she had deleted the post. By 6, a state investigator had already pulled all of it. Sturgill's office had captured the entire page at 8:40 that morning, before the swearing in. She had been doing this for 29 years. She knew exactly what people do at noon. The open house at 1 did not happen. At 4 that afternoon, Kristen Ellingson called a lawyer named Percival Rademacher. He does criminal defense in 3 counties and answers his own phone on holidays. She told him she wanted to get ahead of a small misunderstanding with the new district attorney. He asked her one question before anything else. He asked how many times she had called 911 about that address. There was a pause on that line, too. She said, "A few?" He said, "Ma'am, I am going to need a number." She said, "I would have to look. There is one more thing from that day. And it is the part that made the lawyers in that courtroom sit up." Harvey Nettles still had 3 criminal charges pending against him in city court. Disorderly conduct, failure to identify, resisting arrest. The city prosecutor called him that afternoon and offered to dismiss all 3 by the end of the week. Harvey said no. He said, "Set it for trial. Bench trial. Open court. On the record. I want the body camera footage played in full. From the moment the unit arrived, nothing cut, nothing muted." The prosecutor said, "Sir, that footage does not help us." Harvey said, "I know." Corliss Sturgill opened the file with 2 investigators and a paralegal. And she started where she always starts, which is with the tape. At 8:15 on January 2nd, she called Estella Wofford, the director of Bickham County Emergency Communications. On a recorded line, she said, "I want every call originating from one phone number. Going back 18 months. Raw audio. Not transcripts. Not summaries. I want the automatic call data, the location data, and the dispatcher screen logs for each one. Do not compress the files. Do not let anybody at the police department know this request exists." Estella Wofford said, "Understood. Ma'am." Consider it done. The files came over on a drive the next afternoon. There were 27 completed calls from the phone registered to Kristen Ellingson, all of them about the address at 1418. Wren Hollow Lane, all of them inside 10 months and 11 days. There were also 6 hang-ups. Sturgill listened to all 33 of them herself, in order, in one sitting, with the door shut. Her paralegal said later that she came out after 4 hours and did not say anything about the calls at all. She just asked whether anyone had ever pulled the disposition codes. Somebody pulled them that afternoon. 27 responses. 27 officers dispatched. 27 times a marked unit came down Wren Hollow Lane with its light bar on. 0 reports. Every single one closed out as assist. No action taken. Every single one approved by the same supervisor. Sergeant Heath Tackett's employee number appears 26 times in that column. The last one was approved by a lieutenant while Tackett was on vacation. Sturgill wrote one line in the margin of the printout. It is in the file. It says, "The system did not fail here. The system worked. It was used." Then she played call 19 for the room. 41 seconds. A woman's voice. Calm. Slightly bored. The address. Then the question about how many of these she had to make before somebody did something about these people. Then the 4-second pause. Then, bags. She is carrying bags into the house. One of the investigators asked her to play it again. The body camera footage came on January 4th. It existed because a 25-year-old had checked a box at 2 in the morning against what his sergeant told him. The retention clock had been at day 25 when he flagged it. Without that flag, it would have purged on March 10th, 11 days before anybody thought to ask for it. The file runs 19 minutes. The relevant part is 90 seconds. At 6:41 and 11 seconds, Harvey Nettles hands over a driver's license with 2 fingers. At 6:41 and 19 seconds, Kristen Ellingson takes it out of the officer's hand. At 6:41 and 31 seconds, she reads the name out loud and laughs and says the thing about the mall. At 6:41 and 44 seconds, she walks 4 steps to the curb. At 6:41 and 52 seconds, the license leaves her fingers. The microphone picks up the sound it makes hitting the water. It is a very small sound. Then her voice, bright and helpful, saying, "Oops. Now he has no ID. Now you have to take him in." And then, from off camera, a man's voice saying, "Careful. He is a big one." Sturgill had that 90 seconds pulled and saved separately. She labeled the clip with the statute number for tampering with physical evidence. In that state, it is a felony. It carries more time than everything Harvey Nettles was charged with. Put together. 3 days later, they got a second angle. Barnaby Kilbane, 74, retired county surveyor. Read in the paper that state investigators were canvassing Wren Hollow. He walked down to the corner and unzip-tied a trail camera off a fence post. Then he drove it to the courthouse himself in a grocery bag. The camera had been aimed at that storm drain for 2 years because of raccoons. It caught the entire morning from across the street. Wide. Silent. Time-stamped. You can see the whole shape of the thing in one frame. The cruiser. The officer standing still. The big man, with his hands visible. The woman in pink, walking 4 steps to the curb, with something small held out between 2 fingers. You can also see something the body camera missed. Because the body camera was pointed at Harvey, you can see her look at the cruiser first. Checking. On January 6th, a city public works crew pulled the grate at the corner of Wren Hollow and Marybrook Court. A county evidence technician named Willetta Bramwell went down into the catch basin in waders with a camera and a paper sack. The license was in 11 inches of water against the north wall. Face up. Still laminated. Still readable. She photographed it where it lay before she touched it. Then she bagged it. Sealed it. Initialed the seal. And wrote the exhibit number on the outside in marker. Exhibit 14. 1 driver's license. Water damaged. Name legible. Dolores Trask brought her folder in without being asked. 11 months of association email. Printed. 3-hole punched. In order. Sturgill's paralegal flagged 9 messages. They are not dramatic. That is what makes them work. We should be proactive about the profile of the street. 2 showings fell through this month, and I think we all know why. I am not saying anything. I am saying values. Kristen Ellingson never used a racial term in a single email. She never used one on a single 911 call either. Her lawyer would eventually build his whole defense on that fact. And it would take Corliss Sturgill about 9 seconds to take it apart. On January 14th, Sturgill made a referral of her own, sideways, to the Civil Rights Unit at the United States Attorney's Office. A pattern of calls designed to make a family leave a neighborhood is not only a state crime. Under federal fair housing law, interfering with a person's right to occupy a home because of race is its own violation. It does not require anybody to have said a word out loud. Sturgill's cover letter was 2 sentences. She wrote, 33 calls, 1 address, 10 months. I think you will want this. Officer Judson Brill was interviewed on January 9th with a union representative in the room. He was asked whether Sergeant Tackett instructed him to allow the recording to purge. He said yes. He was asked why he flagged it anyway. He sat there for a while. Then he said, because I was the one who put the handcuffs on, and I wanted somebody who was not me to look at it. He was asked one more question, almost as an afterthought. His answer is, the reason a 16-year sergeant is not a police officer anymore. He was asked how he knew the address before he ever got there. He said, the sergeant told us in briefing. He said 1418 was a problem address. I asked him how he knew that. He said, everybody knows. Somewhere in the middle of all of this. Antoinette Nettles gave a statement of her own. It runs 6 pages and contains almost no adjectives, because she had learned that from her husband. The only line in it a reporter ever quoted was about the office downtown she did not need. She said, $400 a month for 11 months. So I could have a meeting without a police car in my driveway. I want that number in the file. Somebody should have to read it. Heath Tackett gave a statement, 11 days later, through counsel. It ran 4 pages, and the word he used most was workload. Carson Stanhope hired his own lawyer on February 3rd. He did it quietly, 2 weeks before the grand jury, without telling his fiancée. His statement is 9 pages. His lawyer negotiated immunity for him in exchange for it. And the parts that got read out loud in open court later are these. She kept a running list in the notes application on her phone. It was titled MF Activity. Dates, times, 1 line each. Some of the entries were made before the calls, not after. She practiced. He heard her practice. She would say a sentence, stop, and say it again slower. On the night of December 9th, she asked him a question while he was watching a game. He did not think about it again for months. Then an investigator asked him to describe that evening. She asked, how scared do I need to sound? And then, on the same page, the sentence she said out loud to an empty room with the wine glass in her hand. One more, and it stops being a complaint and starts being a pattern, and a pattern gets people moved. They brought Kristen Ellingson in on February 20th. She wore the neon pink blazer. She chose it. Her lawyer told investigators afterward that he had advised against it, and that she said people trust her in that color. Percival Rademacher sat on her left. Corliss Sturgill sat across from her with a laptop, a faller, and no visible interest in being liked. Sturgill played call, 19 first. Kristen looked at the wall. Then she played the 90 seconds of body camera. Kristen watched all of it and her face did not move. Except once. At the sound the license makes hitting the water. When she blinked. Then Sturgill turned the laptop around and left a screenshot on the screen. A notes application. A list titled MF Activity. 61 entries. Rademacher said, "My client is not going to respond to that." Kristen responded to it. She leaned forward and said the sentence she had been holding since the 1st of January. The rehearsed one. The one she thought was a door. She said, "I never used a racial word. Not once. Not in a single call. Not in a single email. You can check all of them. You have checked all of them." Corliss Sturgill said, "I know." She let that sit for a second. Then she said, "Ma'am, nobody in this building thought you would. That is not what we charge. We charge the pattern. And you built me a beautiful one. In order. With timestamps. On your own telephone." The neon pink blazer did not help. On February 26th, in City Court in New Braddock. A bench trial took 1 hour and 10 minutes. The city called Officer Judson Brill, who testified truthfully and against the interest of everyone who signs his paychecks. The defense called nobody. Harvey Nettles did not testify. He sat there in a gray suit and watched 19 minutes of body camera play in open court. Sound up, exactly the way he had asked for it. Including the 90 seconds. There were 40 people in that gallery. And 2 reporters. And a woman in the back row who had driven 2 hours. The judge did not take a recess. She found him not guilty on all 3 counts. Then she said she was making a finding on the record. And she asked the clerk to make sure it went in the file. She said, "There was never probable cause for anything that happened on that driveway. Not for a stop. Not for an arrest. What there was a phone call. A phone call is not a fact." 2 hours later, the state took Kristen Ellingson into custody at her own front door. At 1420 Wren Hollow Lane, she asked if she could change first. They said no. The Bickham County Grand Jury returned a true bill on March 5th. Kristen Ellingson was indicted on 1 count of tampering with physical evidence, a felony, 1 count of filing a false report to law enforcement, elevated to a felony by the pattern statute. The state counts a course of conduct differently than it counts a bad day, and 1 count of obstruction. Percival Rademacher took it to trial because his client insisted. A plea would have required her to stand up in open court and say out loud what she had done. The trial started on August 11th and lasted 3 days. The state called Estella Wofford to authenticate the audio. It called Willetta Bramwell to authenticate Exhibit 14, a water-damaged driver's license in a sealed bag. It called Barnaby Kilbane, who explained to a jury what a trail camera is and why a man buys one for raccoons. It called Judson Brill, who was by then no longer a rookie, and who answered every question in 4 words or less. It called Carson Stanhope, who did not look at the defense table once. The state did not call Harvey Nettles. It did not need him. Corliss Sturgill had decided back in January that this case must never look like a district attorney getting even. The jury was out for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Guilty on all 3 counts. At sentencing in October, the judge said something that ended up printed in a law review the following spring. He said the defendant's own lawyer had argued, correctly, that she never used a racial slur. Then he said that was precisely the problem the court was being asked to address. He said, "You did not need a word. You had a telephone and a police department that answered it." Kristen Ellingson got 34 months in state custody. She was ordered to pay $61,000 in restitution. It covered 11 months of an office rental, a lost clinic contract, and the cost of pulling a storm drain. It also covered 16 hours of a man's life. The court entered a permanent injunction. She may never contact emergency services about that address or its occupants again. For any reason. For the rest of her life. The State Real Estate Commission revoked her license 11 days later in a hearing that lasted 9 minutes. The neon pink bus bench downtown came down in November. For about a week, you could still see the clean rectangle where it had been. The federal matter resolved separately, as those usually do. In a consent judgment, with no admission of wrongdoing and a number on the last page. Heath Tackett resigned in May rather than face a termination hearing. The state revoked his certification in September. He cannot work as a police officer anywhere in that state again. In his interview, he said 11 separate times that he had followed the code. Nobody ever said he had not. That was the finding. Judson Brill kept his job. He did not get a medal, and he did not get promoted. For about 4 months, a certain number of people in that building stopped sitting with him at shift change. He said later that he had expected worse. The ones who stopped sitting with him were mostly the ones who had typed assist. No action taken themselves. They did not want to think about it. In the spring, the department assigned him to teach the new officers one specific block of the academy. Carson Stanhope walked out of the courthouse on the second day of trial and never went back to Marybrook Farms. He had immunity, which is a legal condition, not a moral one. The engagement had ended in February. On the day she found out, he had hired a lawyer. There was no scene. She simply took the ring off in the courthouse parking lot after his testimony. 2 reporters and her own attorney watched her walk to the curb. There is a storm drain at the north end of that lot. She dropped it through the grate, the same way you would drop a receipt. Then she got in the car. One of the reporters wrote it down and nobody printed it, because it was not the kind of detail an editor believes. And Harvey Nettles was not in the courtroom on any of the 3 days. He was 70 miles away in a hotel conference room teaching a continuing education session to 60 assistant district attorneys from 4 counties. The topic was declination. When to not file. He heard the verdict the way everybody else did, on his phone, in a hallway, next to a table of bad coffee. He read it twice. He put the phone in his pocket. Then he went back in and finished the session. There were 20 minutes left on the clock. The people in that room would be making these decisions for the next 30 years. The policy is 1 paragraph long, and it is called Directive 27. Harvey Nettles did not write it. He was not allowed to. And he made a point of saying so. Corliss Sturgill recommended it in the last section of her report. Chief Trudy Rothrock signed it in April. It says this: when an address generates more than 3 police responses in a calendar year that produce no report, the file opens on the caller. Not the resident, the caller. 11 other departments in the state have adopted a version of it since. Judson Brill teaches that block at the academy now. He does not use names. He plays 90 seconds of body camera with the sound up. Then he stands there in the quiet. Then he asks the room one question. What would you have done at second 44? Exhibit 14 came back to Harvey after the appeal window closed. He had gotten a replacement the same week, standing in line at the tag office like anybody else. The old one came home in a manila envelope, warped, with the exhibit sticker still on the bag. It is in the second drawer of his desk. He has never taken it out to show anybody. 1420 Wren Hollow Lane sold in March to a young couple who have no idea. They put a swing on the front porch. Barnaby Kilbane zip-tied his trail camera back on the fence post, pointed at the culvert. For the raccoons, Dovie Nettles comes for Sunday dinner again. She parks in the driveway now, instead of on the street. Nobody told her it was fine. She just started doing it. Antoinette gave up the office downtown in June. And there is one more entry. In a city ledger nobody reads. The following spring, a public works crew ran the annual vacuum truck through the drains at the courthouse lot. Whatever comes out that is not trash gets logged. On the sheet for that day, between a set of keys and a pair of sunglasses, somebody wrote in ballpoint, 1 ring, white metal, clear stone. The city holds found property for 1 year. Nobody ever claimed it. Harvey Nettles still runs at 6:30 in the morning. On the same street, past the same mailboxes. He carried his license zipped in his sleeve pocket for a long time after. Habit is not a decision. Then, one morning in the fall, about a mile out, he reached up to check for it. It was not there. He could not remember when he had stopped. He kept running. So here is the question. If she had said one slur, one time, everybody would call it hate. She never did. 27 calls. 10 months. 1 family. Is that different? Tell me in the comments. Drop a like if you made it this far. And subscribe if you want the next one.
Okay, real talk. The part I cannot get past is the 27 zeros. Not the handcuffs, the 0 reports. This man's address was on the record 27 times, and the record said nothing happened. Every single time, 4 seconds a click. And the only reason any of it survived? A broke rookie at 2 in the morning checking one box he was told not to check. One box. That is the whole thing.